The ship spun like a broken toy as it fell through the orange sky. Captain Jake Morrison gripped his seat and watched the desert planet grow larger in the cracked window. The new horizons had been humanity's pride just hours ago, but now smoke poured from its engines and sparks flew from broken control panels. Dr. Lisa Parker called out damage reports from her station while Tech Sergeant Alex Chun tried to restart the communications array. Nothing worked. They were going down hard. On a world that looked like hell itself, the crash came with a sound like thunder mixed with breaking glass. Jake felt his body slam against the restraints as the ship carved a deep trench through red sand dunes. Metal screamed against rock and the hull split open like a cracked egg. When the terrible noise finally stopped, Jake found himself hanging upside down in his harness, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Dust filled the air and made everything look fuzzy and brown. "Sound off," Jake called out, his voice rough from the dust. One by one, his team responded. Dr. Lisa Parker climbed out from under a fallen panel, her geology tools scattered around her feet. Alex Chen pulled himself up from the floor, his electronics equipment sparking and broken. Dr. Sam Rodriguez emerged from the back compartment, clutching his plant samples that had somehow survived the crash. Marine Corporal Katie Walsh was already on her feet, checking her weapons and scanning for immediate threats. They were alive, but that might not last long. Jake looked through the broken hull at the world outside. Two suns hung in the sky like angry eyes, pouring heat down on endless red dunes. The air shimmered with waves of heat that made the horizon dance and blur. Even inside the broken ship, the temperature was rising fast. Jake's uniform was already soaked with sweat, and they had only been on the ground for minutes. Katie was the first to speak the truth they all knew. "Captain, we need to get out of here before this thing becomes an oven." She was right. The metal hull was already too hot to touch in some places, and the twin suns were climbing higher. Jake nodded and started gathering what they could carry. Emergency water supplies, food packs, medical kit, and whatever tools might help them survive. The ship's main computer was dead, but Alex managed to pull some portable equipment from the wreckage. They stepped out onto the surface of Kepler 442c and felt the full force of the alien world. The heat hit them like walking into a furnace. The sand under their feet was so hot it burned through their boots. The air was thin and dry, sucking moisture from their lungs with every breath. In the distance, rock formations rose like ancient monuments, their surfaces polished smooth by endless sandstorms. Lisa knelt and scooped up a handful of the red sand, letting it run through her fingers. "This is mostly silica with iron oxide," she said, squinting against the glare. "That's why it's so red. There are other minerals too, some I don't recognize." She was already thinking like a scientist, looking for answers in the alien soil. Sam opened his scanners and frowned at the readings. Atmosphere is barely breathable, low oxygen, almost no water vapor. Temperature is 158 degrees and climbing. He looked up at the twin suns that seemed to fill half the sky. "When those suns reach their peak, this place will be hot enough to cook us." Alex tried his communication equipment, but only static came through the speakers. "Long-range comms are dead. The crash damaged our main transmitter, and these solar flares are blocking everything else." He pointed at the dancing lights that flickered around both suns. "Even if I could fix the radio, I don't think signals could get through all that interference." Katie found some shade behind a large piece of the ship's hull and called the others over. It wasn't much cooler, but at least they were out of direct sunlight. She spread out her survival manual and started checking their supplies. "We have water for 3 days if we're careful. Food for maybe 5 days. After that, we're living off the land." She looked around at the empty desert. Whatever land this is, Jake studied the broken landscape around them. The crash site offered almost no shelter. A few scattered rocks, some twisted metal from their ship, and endless dunes stretching to the horizon. The nearest mountains were too far away to reach before the water ran out. They needed to find or build shelter soon, or the heat would kill them long before rescue arrived. "How long before someone comes looking for us?" Lisa asked, though her voice suggested she already knew the answer. Jake checked his mission timeline. We were supposed to check in every 2 weeks. It's been 4 days since our last contact. So maybe 10 days before they realize we're missing? Then however long it takes to organize a search. He didn't mention that the nearest human outpost was 3-star systems away. Even if rescue ships left immediately, it would take months to reach them. As the day wore on, the heat became unbearable. They took turns sitting in the small patch of shade, rationing water in tiny sips. The metal of their crashed ship grew too hot to touch, and the sand around it started to turn to glass. Sam's instruments showed the temperature reaching 170 degrees, then 180, but as the twin suns finally began to set, something unexpected happened. The temperature didn't just drop, it plummeted. Within an hour of sunset, frost began forming on the broken hull of their ship. The desert that had been trying to cook them alive now threatened to freeze them solid. Katie's breath came out in white puffs as the temperature fell below freezing and kept dropping. They huddled together inside a piece of the ship's hull, sharing body heat and trying to understand what they faced. This planet wasn't just hot or cold, it was both extremes in a daily cycle that would kill most living things. The thermal shock alone would crack rock and shatter metal over time. In the distance, beyond the dunes, something moved. Tiny lights flickered like fireflies, but too organized to be natural. Someone or something was watching them, studying these strange creatures who had fallen from the sky. The watchers had seen many ships crash on this desert world over the years. Most crews died within days, overcome by heat or cold or simple despair. These humans looked no different from the others. Soft skin, fragile bodies, primitive technology. They would be dead before the week was over, just like all the rest, but the humans had no intention of dying quietly in the sand. The second day brought new horrors and new hope in equal measure. Jake woke to find ice crystals on his eyebrows and Lisa shivering so hard she could barely hold her geology scanner. The night had been brutal, with temperatures dropping to 40 degrees below zero. They had survived by burning pieces of their ship's interior, but the fuel wouldn't last much longer. When the twin suns rose again, the ice vanished in minutes and the killing heat returned. Lisa spent the morning studying sand samples while the others searched the crash site for useful materials. She worked with intense focus, running every test her portable lab could manage. The results made her forget about the heat for a moment. "Jake, you need to see this," she called. Excitement creeping into her voice despite their desperate situation, she held up a vial of the red sand, which sparkled with tiny crystals in the sunlight. "This isn't ordinary desert sand. It's loaded with silica, iron oxide, aluminum compounds, and something else I've never seen before. Look at these mineral formations." She showed him samples under her field microscope. These crystalline structures are incredibly complex. They're like natural semiconductors. Alex looked over her shoulder at the readings. "What does that mean for us? Can we eat it or drink it?" Lisa shook her head but kept the excitement in her voice. "Better than that. Under extreme heat, silica becomes glass. Not just any glass, but glass that can be shaped and formed into building materials. With the right temperature and pressure, we could turn this sand into construction blocks. Stronger than concrete." Sam joined the conversation, holding his own scanner. "The heat here gets hot enough to melt copper. Are you saying we could use the suns as a forge?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Lisa replied. She pointed at the twisted metal from their ship. "We have mirror fragments, lens pieces, and focusing equipment from the navigation array. If we could concentrate the solar energy, we might be able to reach temperatures of 3,000 degrees or higher. That's hot enough to transform sand into glass blocks." Katie listened to the conversation while cleaning her rifle. "Sounds impossible. How do you move glass blocks that are hot enough to melt steel? How do you even make them the right shape?" Lisa was already working on that problem. The sand has natural binding agents. When heated and cooled properly, it should form blocks automatically. As for moving them, we wait for the night cycle when they cool down. The thermal shock might crack some, but others should remain solid. Alex studied the wreckage of their communications equipment. I might be able to help with the shaping part. Our ship's power cells are still functional, and I can jury-rig some electromagnetic field generators. If we time it right, we could use magnetic fields to guide the molten glass into specific shapes before it cools. Sam had been quiet during the discussion, but now he spoke up with his own discovery. I found something else we can use. There are bacteria in this sand, extremophile organisms that can survive the temperature swings. I've been growing cultures. In my sample containers, he showed them small vials with what looked like colored slime. These bacteria produce organic polymers as waste products. If we can cultivate enough of them, we might have a natural cement to bind our glass blocks together. Jake felt something he hadn't experienced since the crash. Hope. Not the desperate hope of rescue, but the practical hope of survival through their own efforts. They're talking about building a permanent structure, a shelter that could survive this planet's extremes. More than a shelter, Lisa said, her eyes bright with possibility. A fortress. Something designed specifically for this environment, using the planet's own materials and energy sources. Katie had stopped cleaning her rifle and was listening intently. Where would we build it? This flat desert doesn't offer much protection. During the hottest part of the day, when they were forced to shelter in the ship's shadow, Katie scouted the surrounding area through binoculars. She found what they needed about a kilometer away, a natural depression surrounded by rock formations that would provide some protection from wind and sandstorms. The depression was deep enough to offer shade during part of the day, and the rocks would serve as a foundation. It's not perfect, Katie reported, but it's the best defensive position within walking distance. The rock formations would help support whatever we build, and there's even a small cave that might have underground water. Sam tested the cave and found traces of moisture, though not enough to sustain them long-term. But Lisa's analysis of the rock showed it contained the same unusual crystals as the sand, suggesting the entire area had been formed by similar geological processes. As they discussed the plan, the scope of what they were proposing became clear. They would need to work during the brief periods when the temperature was tolerable, probably early morning and late evening. They would have to build solar furnaces capable of melting sand, create molds for shaping glass blocks, and somehow transport and assemble thousands of pounds of building material in one of the most hostile environments in the galaxy. It's insane, Alex said, but he was already sketching designs for electromagnetic forming devices. Completely crazy, Sam agreed, while calculating how much bacterial culture they would need. Absolutely impossible, Katie added as she planned. Supply routes between the crash site and the building location. Jake looked at his team, covered in dust and sweat, exhausted from just 2 days on this hellish world. They were talking about a construction project that would challenge engineers, with unlimited resources and perfect conditions. They had salvaged tools, limited supplies, and were working on a planet that alternated between furnace and freezer every 12 hours. So we're doing this, he asked. Lisa nodded firmly. The alternative is sitting here waiting to die. I'd rather die trying to build something impossible than give up without a fight. In the distance, the mysterious lights flickered again among the dunes. The Watchers had observed many crashed ships over the centuries, and they had seen every possible response to this world's deadly environment. Some crews tried to repair their ships until the heat killed them. Others attempted to signal for rescue, until despair overwhelmed them. A few tried to find shelter in caves or under rocks, but the temperature extremes always won in the end. But these humans were discussing something the Watchers had never seen before. They wanted to build permanent structures using the planet's own hostile environment as a tool. The idea was so foreign to the Watchers' experience that their translation system struggled to process it. In their culture, hostile environments were conquered with massive technology, overwhelming force, and terraforming equipment. The concept of working with a deadly environment instead of against it made no sense. The Watchers increased their surveillance, curious to see how quickly these deluded humans would realize the impossibility of their plan. Building anything permanent on this world required advanced materials, climate control systems, and industrial machinery. These primitives had none of those things. They would be dead within days, just like all the others, but as the humans began sorting through salvageable materials and making detailed plans, something in their behavior troubled the watchers. There was no despair in their movements, no panic in their voices. They worked with the methodical efficiency of people who expected to succeed. The watchers settled in to observe what they assumed would be an amusing but brief struggle against the inevitable. The work began before dawn on the third day, when the temperature was merely hot instead of lethal. Jake organized his team into a complex schedule that would let them work around the planet's deadly rhythm. They had 2 hours after sunrise and 2 hours before sunset when the heat was bearable enough for construction work. The rest of the time would be spent in preparation, planning, and survival. Lisa set up her sand processing station in the depression Katie had found. She worked like a woman possessed, mixing different sand samples to find the perfect combination for glass production. The red sand alone was too brittle when heated, but mixed with darker sand from near the rocks, it formed a compound that could withstand rapid temperature changes. She discovered that adding small amounts of crushed crystal from the cave walls made the mixture even stronger. Alex worked on the most critical piece of equipment, the solar furnace. He salvaged every mirror, lens, and reflective surface from their crashed ship, building an array that could focus the twin suns' energy into a beam hot enough to melt metal. The device looked like something from a mad scientist's laboratory, with mirrors mounted on adjustable arms and focusing lenses, arranged in precise geometric patterns. Sam faced perhaps the most difficult challenge. He needed to cultivate enough bacteria to produce gallons of organic cement, but the organisms were incredibly sensitive to temperature fluctuations. He built a primitive laboratory in the deepest part of the cave, where the temperature stayed relatively stable. Using salvaged medical equipment and food containers, he created dozens of bacterial cultures that slowly produced the polymers they needed. Katie took on the dangerous job of logistics. She had to move tons of sand from the crash site to their building location, transport the finished glass blocks while they were still hot, and somehow assemble everything into a structure that could survive the planet's extremes. She rigged up sleds from pieces of the ship's hull and developed a system for handling superheated materials. Using improvised tools, the first test of their glass-making process came on the fourth day. Lisa prepared a small batch of her sand mixture, while Alex aligned his solar furnace. When the twin suns reached their peak, he focused their combined energy into a beam that turned sand into molten glass in seconds. The temperature at the focal point exceeded 4,000 degrees, hot enough to vaporize steel, but controlling the molten glass proved harder than making it. The first attempts produced misshapen lumps that cracked when they cooled. Alex adjusted his electromagnetic field generators, trying to shape the glass as it formed. Sam's bacterial cement was still too thin to be useful. Katie burned her hands, trying to move blocks that were still too hot. They learned from each failure. Lisa adjusted her sand mixture ratios. Alex refined his electromagnetic shaping techniques. Sam experimented with different bacterial strains. Katie developed better cooling and handling methods. By the end of the first week, they were producing rough but usable glass blocks. The blocks themselves were unlike anything the watchers had ever seen. Instead of the regular geometric shapes most species preferred, the human blocks had organic curves and flowing lines. Lisa explained that curved surfaces distributed stress better than sharp corners, making them more resistant to thermal shock. The blocks fit together like puzzle pieces, creating joints that were both flexible and strong. As the second week began, the fortress started to take shape. The foundation followed the natural contours of the rock depression, creating a structure that seemed to grow from the planet itself. The walls rose in gentle spirals with thick bases that tapered toward the top. Internal chambers were designed to channel airflow naturally, creating cooling currents during the day and trapping warm air at night. Alex integrated salvaged electronics throughout the structure as they built. Temperature sensors, air quality monitors, and simple communication devices were embedded in the glass blocks themselves. The fortress would be able to tell them about conditions inside and outside, warning of dangerous temperature spikes or system failures. Sam's bacterial cultures finally reached critical mass during the second week. His organic cement proved to be remarkably effective, bonding glass blocks into a seamless whole while remaining flexible enough to handle thermal expansion. The bacteria continued to live within the cement, constantly producing new polymers that actually strengthened the bonds over time. The Watchers' confusion grew with each passing day. Their advanced sensors confirmed that the humans were somehow surviving the planet's killing cycle, but the method made no sense. The glass fortress appeared to be constructed from nothing but sand and sunlight, materials that should be completely inadequate for permanent construction. Yet their instruments showed the structure was sound and growing stronger. By the third week, the fortress had become a complex of interconnected chambers and passages. The main living area was a large dome with thick walls that stored heat during the day and released it slowly at night. Smaller chambers served as workshops, storage areas, and specialized laboratories. The entire structure was honeycombed with air passages that created natural ventilation. The most remarkable feature was the water collection system. Lisa had designed the outer walls with microscopic channels that condensed moisture from the dramatic temperature swings between day and night. The tiny amount of water vapor in the atmosphere was captured and funneled into storage tanks built into the foundation. It wasn't much, but combined with their remaining supplies, it was enough to sustain them indefinitely. Sam's greatest triumph came in the form of food production. He had successfully modified some of the local bacteria to produce proteins that humans could digest. The bacterial farms were housed in specialized chambers within the fortress walls, where they fed on organic waste and produced edible biomass. The food wasn't appetizing, but it would keep them alive. Katie had become an expert at working with superheated glass. She developed techniques for rapid cooling that prevented cracking, and her assembly methods created walls that were both strong and flexible. The fortress could handle the daily thermal expansion and contraction without developing dangerous stress fractures. Jake coordinated everything, making sure the construction stayed on schedule and managing their dwindling supplies. He also served as the fortress's architect, making decisions about layout and design based on everyone's input. The structure that emerged was uniquely human, practical but beautiful, efficient but comfortable. As the third week ended, they moved into their new home. The fortress wasn't finished, but it was livable. The temperature inside remained stable even when the outside air reached nearly 200 degrees. The walls glowed softly with stored heat during the cold nights, keeping them warm without any external energy source. The Watchers called for additional observers. What they were seeing challenged everything they knew about planetary survival and construction techniques. These humans had created a permanent settlement, using only the materials and energy sources that made the planet uninhabitable for everyone else. It was impossible, but it was happening. The fortress stood in the desert like a jewel made of glass and determination, growing stronger each day as the bacteria continued their work and the humans added new improvements. What had started as a desperate survival plan was becoming something unprecedented, a human city born from sand and fire. The Watchers realized they were witnessing something that would change how their species viewed the universe. These humans didn't just survive hostile environments, they transformed them into homes. 3 weeks after the crash, the fortress had become something none of them had imagined possible. What started as a desperate shelter had evolved into a living structure that seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the planet itself. The walls pulsed gently with stored thermal energy, creating patterns of light and shadow that shifted throughout the day. The bacterial colonies within the glass had formed networks that strengthened the structure continuously, making it more resilient with each passing hour. Jake stood in the central chamber, watching temperature readings that would have amazed their engineers back on Earth. Outside, the twin suns were pushing surface temperatures toward 200 degrees, but inside the fortress it was a comfortable 72 degrees. The walls weren't just insulating against the heat, they were actively managing it. storing excess energy during the day and releasing it gradually when needed. Lisa had made a discovery that changed everything they thought they knew about their new home. The glass walls weren't simply containing the bacterial colonies they were feeding them. The unique mineral composition of the sand created a complex ecosystem within the structure itself. The bacteria consumed trace minerals from the glass and expelled waste products that actually reinforced the molecular bonds between the building blocks. "It's like the fortress is alive," she explained to the others during their evening meal. "The bacteria are processing minerals, the glass is conducting energy, and the whole system is becoming more integrated every day. We didn't just build a shelter, we created a symbiotic organism." Sam nodded enthusiastically as he checked readings from his biological monitoring stations. "The bacterial colonies are spreading through microscopic channels in the glass. They're creating a neural network of sorts, sharing resources and information throughout the entire structure. When one section gets too hot, the bacteria redirect cooling fluids from other areas. When temperature drops too fast, they release stored energy to maintain stability." Alex had expanded his electronic systems to work with the biological components Sam had developed. "I'm getting sensor data from all over the fortress now. The bacteria are interfacing with my monitoring equipment somehow, giving me readings I never programmed for. They're telling me about air quality, structural stress, even weather patterns outside." Katie had become the fortress's construction chief, constantly adding new features and improvements. "The weapon storage chamber is maintaining perfect temperature and humidity for our equipment. The observation deck gives us a clear view in all directions, and the emergency escape routes are finished. This place is better defended than most military bases." But the fortress offered more than just safety and comfort. It was producing everything they needed to survive indefinitely. The water collection system had exceeded all expectations, gathering enough moisture each night to meet their needs with surplus for emergencies. The bacterial food production chambers were yielding protein-rich biomass that actually tasted decent when prepared properly. The most remarkable development was the fortress's ability to expand itself. The bacterial colonies had learned to secrete specialized polymers that could bond new glass blocks to existing walls. When the humans created new building materials using their solar furnace, the fortress itself helped incorporate them into the structure. It was as if the building wanted to grow. Jake had started thinking of their situation in completely different terms. They weren't stranded survivors waiting for rescue anymore. They were colonists who had successfully established humanity's first permanent settlement on Kepler 442c. The fortress was proof that humans could live anywhere if they approached the challenge with the right combination of science, creativity, and determination. The daily routine had settled into a comfortable pattern. Morning hours were spent on construction and maintenance, working with the solar furnace to create new building materials and expand the fortress's capabilities. The hottest part of the day was devoted to interior work, maintaining the bacterial cultures, monitoring systems, and planning future improvements. Evening hours brought more construction work as temperatures became tolerable again. During the fourth week, they received their first visitor. Katie spotted movement in the distance. During her morning watch, something that wasn't quite like the mysterious lights they had seen before. Through binoculars, she could make out a small vehicle approaching across the dunes, moving with purpose rather than the random patterns of wind-blown debris. "We've got company," she announced over the fortress's internal communication system. "Some kind of craft heading our way from the east." Jake joined her on the observation deck, studying the approaching vehicle through his own binoculars. It was sleek and crystalline, moving without visible propulsion across the sand. "That's definitely artificial. The question is whether they're friendly or hostile." The vehicle stopped about 100 meters from the fortress and simply sat there, as if waiting for something. Jake could see movement inside, though the transparent walls made it difficult to make out details. After several minutes, a section of the vehicle opened and 3 figures emerged. They were unlike anything the humans had encountered before. Tall and angular, with bodies that seemed to be made of living crystal, They moved with fluid grace across the burning sand. Their forms shifted and changed as they walked, adapting to the harsh environment in ways that suggested advanced biological engineering. "Those must be our mysterious watchers," Alex said, recording everything with his remaining cameras. "They don't look human, but they don't look hostile either." The crystalline beings stopped at what seemed to be a respectful distance and made no aggressive moves. One of them stepped forward and began making complex gestures with arms that bent in ways human limbs could not. Lights flickered within their transparent bodies, creating patterns that might have been some form of communication. Sam was fascinated by their biology. "Look at how they're handling the temperature extremes. Their bodies are actually adjusting to the thermal stress in real time. Those aren't technological adaptations, they're biological ones." Lisa studied their crystalline structure through her scanner. Their bodies are incorporating minerals from the environment as they move. They're literally adapting to this planet's conditions at the cellular level. Katie kept her hand near her weapon but didn't draw it. They could have attacked us any time during the past 3 weeks if that's what they wanted. The fact that they're approaching openly suggests they want to communicate. Jake made a decision that would change everything. He activated the fortress's external communication system, a simple audio speaker Alex had rigged up outside the main entrance. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel New Horizons. We come in peace and would welcome peaceful contact." The response was immediate and startling. The crystalline beings stopped their gestures, and one of them spoke in perfect English, though the voice had a strange harmonic quality that suggested artificial translation. "We are Zephyrians of the Third Crystalline Republic. We have observed your construction activities. We came to understand what we have witnessed." The lead Zephyrian stepped closer, its body shimmering with internal lights. "I am Commander Vextara. We have monitored this world for many cycles, cataloging the failure of all species to establish permanent settlements. Your success challenges our understanding of planetary habitability." Jake felt a mixture of excitement and caution. First contact with an alien species was a momentous occasion, but he needed to be careful not to reveal any weaknesses or strategic information. "We're explorers and scientists. When our ship crashed, we had to adapt to survive." "Adapt," Vextara repeated the word as if testing its meaning. "You speak of adaptation, but our sensors indicate you have fundamentally altered this environment. The thermal patterns around your structure are unlike anything in our databases." Lisa stepped forward, unable to contain her scientific curiosity. "We didn't alter the environment. We learned to work with it. The materials we used came from the planet itself. The energy we use comes from the suns. We just found ways to combine them that created something new." The Zephyrian commander's body flickered with rapid light patterns that might have indicated surprise or confusion. "You achieved permanent settlement using only indigenous resources? This contradicts all known principles of hostile world colonization." Alex joined the conversation, his electronics background making him curious about their technology. "How do your people usually colonize difficult planets?" "With massive technological intervention," Vextara replied. "Atmospheric processors, climate modification systems, terraforming machinery. We reshape worlds to suit our needs." The concept of reshaping yourselves to suit the world is unfamiliar. Sam couldn't resist asking about their biology. "Your bodies seem to adapt automatically to environmental conditions. How is that different from what we did?" "Our adaptations are biological, built into our genetic structure over millions of years. What you have accomplished appears to be technological adaptation using primitive tools and indigenous materials. Our scientists will find this most intriguing." As the conversation continued, Jake realized they were witnessing something historic. Commander Vextara and her 2 companions watched in stunned silence as the fortress demonstrated its evening transformation. As the twin suns set and the temperature plummeted, the crystalline walls began to glow with stored thermal energy. The bacterial networks within the structure pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, creating a display that was both beautiful and functional. The building was actively managing its internal environment, maintaining perfect living conditions while the outside world shifted from furnace to freezer. "This is impossible," one of the other Zephyrians whispered, its body flickering with rapid light patterns that Jake was beginning to recognize as signs of agitation. "No primitive species should be able to achieve stable habitation on a Class X death world using only local materials." Vexthera moved closer to the fortress walls, her crystalline hands hovering just above the surface. "The thermal dynamics are unlike anything in our engineering databases. This structure is not merely withstanding the environmental extremes, it is using them as energy sources." Lisa couldn't resist the opportunity to explain their methods to such an advanced species. "We didn't fight against the planet's natural cycles. We learned to work with them. The day-night temperature differential drives our entire system. The walls store heat during the day and release it at night, while the bacterial colonies convert thermal energy into chemical energy that strengthens the structure." Bacterial colonies? The third Zephyrian stepped forward, its voice filled with what might have been disbelief. "You are using biological agents as construction materials?" Sam nodded enthusiastically. "Not just construction materials. The bacteria are partners. They help maintain the structure, produce food and building compounds, even assist with environmental monitoring. The fortress is a living ecosystem." Vexthara's body went through a complex series of color changes before she spoke again. "In our experience, biological systems are unreliable for critical infrastructure. They evolve, mutate, and develop purposes that may conflict with their original design." "How do you control such variables?" "We don't control them," Jake replied. "We guide them. The bacteria have their own needs and behaviors, but those needs align with ours. They want to survive and reproduce, which means maintaining the fortress. We provide them with nutrients and habitat, they provide us with services. It's cooperation, not control." The concept seemed to cause some kind of philosophical crisis among the Zephyrians. They spent several minutes communicating with each other. In rapid bursts of colored light, their conversation too fast and complex for the translation system to follow. Finally, Vexthara turned back to the humans. "We must contact our superiors. What you have accomplished here contradicts fundamental principles of our colonization doctrine. We have classified dozens of worlds as uninhabitable because they lack the infrastructure support necessary for technological terraforming. If your methods can be duplicated..." Alex realized the implications immediately. "You're talking about opening up entire star systems that were previously considered impossible to colonize. Worlds that were written off because they were too hot, too cold, too hostile for conventional approaches." "Precisely," Vexthara confirmed. "The Zephyrian Republic has dismissed thousands of potential colonies because they would require massive technological investment with uncertain returns. Your approach suggests that intelligent adaptation might be more effective than brute force modification." Katie had been listening to the conversation while keeping watch on the surrounding desert. "What happens next? Do you take us prisoner? Study us like laboratory specimens?" Vexthara's body shifted to patterns that the translation system interpreted. "As amusement, nothing so dramatic. We would like to request formal diplomatic contact with your species. The Zephyrian Republic is always interested in useful technologies and innovative approaches to galactic expansion. Your methods could benefit both our peoples." "There's one problem with that," Jake said carefully. "We're not exactly representatives of Earth's government. We're explorers whose ship crashed. We don't have the authority to negotiate treaties or trade agreements. But you have demonstrated practical capabilities that surpass anything in our databases," Vexthara replied. "Your fortress is proof that humans possess problem-solving abilities that would be valuable to our civilization. We would be willing to provide transportation back to your home system in exchange for knowledge sharing and future cooperation." The offer hung in the air like a tempting mirage. Return to Earth, to families and familiar worlds, with the added bonus of establishing humanity's first alien alliance. But Jake found himself hesitating, and he could see similar uncertainty in his team's faces. Can we have some time to discuss this privately? He asked. The Zephyrians withdrew to their vehicle while the humans gathered in the fortress's central chamber. The space felt more like home than anywhere Jake had been in years. The walls hummed with gentle warmth, the air carried the faint sounds of the bacterial colonies at work, and the observation windows showed their glass city spreading across what had once been empty desert. This is what we've been working toward, Alex said. Getting home, making contact with Earth, sharing what we've learned. But is it really what we want? Lisa asked quietly. We've built something unique here, something that's never existed before in the galaxy. A human settlement that grows stronger every day, a living city that adapts and evolves. Sam was monitoring his bacterial cultures, watching their activity patterns on his displays. The colonies are thriving. They're developing new capabilities faster than I can catalog them. In a few months, this place might be producing technologies we haven't even imagined yet. Katie had been thinking about strategic implications. If we go back to Earth, what happens to the fortress? Do we abandon it? Do the Zephyrians claim it as their own? Does it become just another scientific curiosity? Jake realized that over the past month, they had stopped thinking of themselves as stranded survivors. They had become pioneers, the founders of humanity's first foothold in a hostile galaxy. The fortress wasn't just their shelter, it was their home and their legacy. We could ask for time, he said slowly. The Zephyrians seemed genuinely interested in learning from us. Maybe we could establish this as humanity's first official colony world with proper support and recognition from Earth. A permanent settlement, Lisa said, testing the idea. Haven Base, the first human city on Kepler 442c. With regular supply runs and communication with Earth, Alex added. We wouldn't be cut off anymore, but we wouldn't abandon what we've built either. And other humans could come here, Sam said with growing excitement. Scientists, engineers, colonists who want to try something completely new. We could teach them our methods, help them build their own living cities. Katie nodded slowly. It would give humanity a foothold in this sector of space. And it would prove that humans can survive anywhere if we're willing to adapt and innovate. They called Vexthara back and presented their proposal. Instead of immediate evacuation, they wanted to establish formal diplomatic contact between the Zephyrian Republic and Earth, with their settlement serving as a demonstration of human capabilities and a base for future cooperation. They would stay on Kepler 442c as official representatives of humanity, building the first of what might become many human colonies in previously uninhabitable systems. The Zephyrian commander's response was immediate and positive. This arrangement would be ideal for our purposes. We can provide communication equipment that will allow instant contact with your homeworld, and regular supply deliveries while your settlement becomes self-sufficient. More importantly, she continued, we would like to establish a permanent observation post here. Our scientists are eager to study your adaptation methods and learn how they might be applied to our own colonization efforts. As the negotiations continued into the night, Jake looked out through the fortress's windows at the alien landscape that had become their home. The desert stretched endlessly under strange stars, but it no longer looked hostile. It looked like opportunity. 6 months later, Haven Base had grown into a small city of interconnected glass domes and spires that seemed to flow like water across the desert landscape. The original fortress stood at its heart, now surrounded by residential areas, laboratories, workshops, and a spaceport where human and Zephyrian ships arrived regularly. The population had grown to over 200 humans and 50 Zephyrian scientists, all working together to perfect the art of adaptive colonization. The bacterial colonies had evolved into sophisticated biological computers that helped manage everything from life support to weather prediction. The glass-making techniques had been refined to produce materials stronger than anything manufactured. On Earth, Jake stood on the observation deck of the central tower, watching new arrivals emerge from the latest transport ship. Among them were xenobiologists who wanted to study the bacterial partnerships, engineers eager to learn biomechanical construction techniques, and families who had come to make permanent homes in humanity's first truly alien city, the aliens who had once watched in confusion as humans built a fortress from sand and sun now worked alongside them as partners and students. The impossible had become routine.